Don't Call Me Bigfoot sounds like it might be a documentary about Shaq, but I assure you it's not. It actually feels more like a Bigfoot training manual for anyone who thinks they might be interested in hunting the elusive creature. They go over everything from the basics, like how it got its name and the tribal beliefs, all the way to what to pack if you plan on going out into the woods, and then everything in between. So, if you think you might be interested in hunting down the creature, then this movie's for you. Although technically, I guess there's a total of 4 people interviewed, it's really just 2, Alex and Matthew. Alex is a little bit more on the scientific side, although he's definitely a believer, and Matt is more of an enthusiast. It opens up right away, talking about how Bigfoot got its name. Duh, it has big feet. I guess the early miners and explorers didn't have much of an imagination.
Very original. Kind of like the guy from Texas is named Tex.
Then we get the title screen, and the music here sounds an awful lot like Skyrim, don't you think? Anyway, they continue with Alex and Matthew talking a little bit about themselves and why they're qualified to talk about Bigfoot. Alex did go to school for anthropology, and Matt's mom did as well, so that's got to count for something, right? They both grew up with a fascination with the topic, and both have their share of encounters. For example, Matt talks about he was out hunting coyote, using a speaker to blast calls. He wasn't really getting anywhere, so just for fun, he played a predator call. It wasn't long after that he heard footsteps behind him, and a rock was thrown.
Big old rock.
Him and his buddy booked it out of there pretty quickly, and as they walked, they could hear footsteps walking with them. When they stopped, the footsteps stopped. Next, we go into Bigfoot and man's evolution, bringing up Gigantopithecus and saying that they're finding new fossils and species every year that change the way we thought 10 years ago. For example, fairly recently, they found 3-foot-tall humans. Not dwarfs or a mutation, just small humans. And they lived alongside Homo sapiens. Basically, we go over all this to just say, yes, it is possible that a giant hairy ape-like man could have existed, and might still today. Next, we move on to researching Bigfoot. What are some things to look out for? Well, Alex says he knows several Bigfoot hotspots, where there's a water source and low population of humans. You have to think like a Bigfoot. You'll need water to live, and you don't want to be seen. You're going to have to stay away from people. The most common place giant ape-like fossils have been found is Eurasia, which makes sense. It's the largest continent on the Earth, but I digress. Most cryptozoologists believe that these ancient creatures crossed the Bergia land bridge to get to North America, which I tend to agree. If these creatures are flesh and blood, then that's probably how they spread out all over the world. They go into the history of the creature, which is mostly Native American stories and cave art, which does look pretty cool. But it isn't just Native Americans. They've found drawings in Mongolia and even have stories of Vikings encountering the beast. Some of these stories might be chalked up to the boogeyman, fables to keep kids out of the woods at night. But who knows? Every story has a bit of truth in it, right? Now, let's say you've found some Bigfoot evidence. What do you do now? Well, take a step back and ask yourself if it makes sense. Is it just a broken branch? Well, that happens all the time in nature. But if it was twisted, well, that's a little more interesting. If you find a print, is it close to water? On a game trail? How far from the main road? Is it in a protected area? These are all good questions you have to ask when going out and doing serious research. Matt goes on to say that sometimes you might even find some stranger things in the woods. For example, there's been reports of finding a campsite out in the middle of nowhere with unburnt wood in the fire pit, almost like it's staged. But what human would waste their time doing it? Is it possible Sasquatch is? Could they mimic what they see humans doing? An interesting thought. Another tip is howls, but Matt is actually against it. He says that yelling out in the woods is just a good way to make all the animals run in the opposite direction. If you want to have an encounter, it might be best to just sit in silence and listen. The forest can tell you a lot. If the noises of the woods, the birds, the squirrels, even the mosquitoes quit, it might be a sign that the king has come home. Another good question they ask is, if Bigfoot's real, why is there no more of a fossil record? Well, it turns out that there's quite a bit of factors for bone to turn into stone, and the current record is still incomplete. We used to think that these were all different types of animals. Homo erectus, Homo florensis, Neanderthals, and so on. But now we think that these races bred with one another and crossed over. Back then, if you found a Neanderthal woman who can hunt, you made her your wife, just so you could survive. Phew, I'm glad I didn't live back then. So, all that's fine and good, but what about modern times? What Bigfoot evidence is the most convincing? Well, of course, they have to bring up the Patterson-Gimlin footage, and for good reason. It's still the best evidence we got. The proportions, the muscles, it all lines up with a Bigfoot. They do mention how trustworthy these guys are. Gimlin's the real deal, but Patterson was a character, and they did find a drawing prior to them going out and getting the footage of what they captured. But what if that's just what Bigfoots look like? They also talk about Ron Moorhead and the Sierra Sounds, and how the creature is getting octaves higher and lower than humans can do. On those tapes, they also found a form of language, the same words or phrases which would indicate two or more creatures communicating. They also bring up the Todd Standings footage. If you don't know, Todd Standings is a cryptozoologist who had a bit of a name for himself. Then he went and made a documentary called Discovering Bigfoot, which actually made it to Netflix, where the masses were able to watch it. His main claim of evidence is a very clear picture of the face of a Bigfoot. I won't go into too much detail, but it's pretty much been a proven hoax. And just like that, Todd Standings' reputation went down the drain. Speaking of hoaxes, they do go into why someone would want to try to pull off a hoax. I think in Standing's situation, he was legit earlier on, but he got some good evidence and just had to get more and more and more, which escalated until he was forced to fake it. But others maybe just want their 15 minutes of fame. They talk about another case where a guy was running in the street in an ape costume, I guess trying to trick people, and he got hit by a car. So, if you're gonna be dumb, you gotta be tough.
If you're gonna be dumb, you gotta be tough.
Another hard question to answer is, why haven't any Bigfoot corpses been found? And one possible explanation is that when an animal's about to die, be it from old age or an injury, that animal will wander off into the woods to find a nice shady spot away from anything else. Maybe Bigfoot do the same. North America also has very acidic soil that would eat away at bones so fast that within a month, you might only find a bone or two. Then there's also the fact that they might bury their dead or, heck, maybe eat them. Who knows? Next, on to DNA evidence. And one thing that always bothered me is that the DNA is always inconclusive, or it's human and something else, but they don't know what. Well, that's only because we don't have an official record of DNA of a Sasquatch. Why don't we just take the best evidence we have, maybe from a dozen or so of these inconclusive findings, and just say, okay, this is Bigfoot. You don't have to make it official or anything, just so we have something to compare future samples to. If it matches, say, okay, this would be a Bigfoot. Then, if you get hundreds of the same unknown DNA, chances are it's probably a Bigfoot. Come on, scientists, do I have to do all the work for you? So what about a government cover-up? There's been stories of people who've
and
shot
people have
these
come out and
creatures,
started saying,
then
hold up,
gotten a
how
visit
does the
from men in
government get
suits who
disposed of the
take the
body?
body and
And
then
people have
tell them
said,
you
we
didn't
know it's
see
a theory,
anything.
you saw it. It's
A
either
lot
going
of
to
times,
disappear
some good video
or it's going to
evidence
be
will just
destroyed.
disappear, and there's been
If you
reports
come
of
to me and say you
helicopters
saw
hauling
Bigfoot,
away
that's fine.
Bigfoot
But if
bodies
you and 3
after
or 4
Mount
of your
St. Helens
buddies were out on
erupted.
a hike and you were
But
telling the same
why?
story
Why would
about the
they
same
want to cover it
location,
all up?
maybe even one of
Maybe
you
it's
has a
the
cell phone
logging
picture of it,
industry? If the
that's what you
government
might
admits that
experience
these creatures
some
are
kind of
living in the
cover.
woods,
Now,
then they'd have
then
to
the
be
logging industry
protected,
would be shut
and that's
down, and
bad
there's a
business
lot
for
of
the
insiders
loggers.
in the logging industry.
There's also
And then
been
there's a lot of
reports of
missing
these
people. There's
creatures
tons of
taking
people who've gone
humans,
missing in the
so it's
woods,
a
and I
bit of
would
a
assume maybe not
liability.
all of them,
If the
but some of those
government
people have
knows,
probably been
they'd be
taken and killed or
responsible.
eaten by
And
Bigfoot.
don't forget about the
Maybe
fun
some have a
stuff,
biblical
like the
connection.
Bigfoot alien
Stranger
connection, the
things, keep it
biblical
as a coffee
connection,
mug
and
or a
it
funny
seems like
picture.
the
I could see
agenda is to
Anthony
keep
saying,
Bigfoot a
oh yeah, you
joke.
saw Bigfoot.
But
Yeah, I bet you
that
got
might be
abducted by
starting to
aliens.
go away.
It's,
The guy's advice to the
whatever it is,
government for
there's no
disclosure:
saying it's the government.
just
There's no saying it's
stop.
a third party
Stop
entity. There's no
trying to
saying
cover
it's
it all up
the
and
Illuminati or
just let
something,
it
whatever.
happen.
There's
Sooner
still
or
research
later,
being done
guys are
on
gonna
woods
find a
haunting
body
stuff.
and bring one
Lots of
in.
videos
Just
discussing
let it go
different
from there.
subgenres and
Act like you
questions.
didn't know anything
How
about
much
it
does a
and
Bigfoot
let
weigh?
Bigfoot
How
get
tall do
discovered.
they get?
They end the movie with some advice on how to become a Bigfoot
That
hunter.
can be one thing that
Mainly,
doesn't get
be
talked about
careful.
enough.
The
Is
woods are a
looking for
dangerous
Bigfoot.
place and
So
you
there's
have
a
to
lot of TV
respect
shows,
it.
right, that
Big hairy monster or
or
not.
shows
Bring
that go
bear
out there.
spray,
The
GPS,
thing I always
maps,
tell
a
when I end all my
friend, and
videos, I
be
always say,
prepared.
stay safe in the
There's
woods.
more than just trees in the woods. And that was Don't Call Me Bigfoot. I just want to say real quick, I don't necessarily believe everything I talk about here. My goal is to just give a nice little summary of the movie I just watched. With that being said, it's fun to hear about the paranormal alien government cover-ups from time to time, and the truth is, no one knows what's out there. So, until we do, we're both wrong and right. Don't Call Me Bigfoot is a pretty good introduction to the topic. They go over a broad range of things and ask questions from the most common to hard to answer questions, even if their explanation is simply, I don't know. My only complaint is that it's really just two guys. They do have a couple more people that chime in every once in a while, but that's few and far between. For the most part, it's Alex and Matthew. Which is fine, the guys seem to know their stuff honestly, but it would have been nice to get some bigger names sprinkled in there every once in a while. And I kinda wish they would have done some sort of an investigation. Instead, it was just interviews. I know these guys spend time out in the woods too, it just would have been a nice change of scenery. They also jump back and forth between topics a bit. They would talk about evolution and Neanderthals, and then they'd talk about the tribal traditions moving on. And then they'd jump right back to Neanderthals again. It just would have been nice for them to stay on topic. But that's all really just nitpicks. In the end, Don't Call Me Bigfoot is a good place to start if you're interested in the topic. And if you already know it all, then you might still learn a thing or two. I give it 2.5 Bigfoots. Oh wait, we're not supposed to call them Bigfoots. That's the title of the movie after all. 2.5 hairy giants that just so happen to have big feet. Out of 4.
There was, Homo erectus, Homo habilis, Homo heidelbergensis, Homo florensis, Neanderthals, Cro-Magnums,